Man, this is probably like one of the most boring topics ever, but kind of surprised that people are not talking about this that much because it's also one of the most important. Hey, what's up? It's Kit, time for another video. Today we're talking about leaders, and I'm gonna give you practical tips for your jigging leaders. Let us start. Now, before everything else, these are three things you need to pay attention to. Probably three of the most important things that you need. Okay, firstly, quality. Quality doesn't necessarily mean price. Okay, so for me, quality is first and foremost consistency. Okay, price is when you're talking about quality, it's kind of like you get what you pay for. All right, so availability, of course, talking about this whole thing and then it's not available in your part of the world, so kind of useless. So availability, consistency, and durability. All right, so price is kind of like the third tier right there, but a safe bet always is to go into the more established brand. So for me, it's Suffix, Momoy, and Yuzuri. Those are the three that I could readily find in the shops that I go to. So those are the ones that I stick with. It is good to note that if you're buying from a place that have their own factory, you know that there'd be a bit more consistent. Suffix has their own factory, Momoy has their own factory, so those are my top two. Buy quality leaders you can find. You don't want to be in a fishing situation where your leader fails on you. You know, sometimes it could be the knot, it could be just the leader itself, you know, it deteriorates. So yeah, quality is very important. Second thing, very important. I know there's a lot of people there that don't know how to tie an FG or a PR, other similar braid to leader knots, and you don't know when you need to retie. So best advice I could give you is to master at least one of these knots and really learn how to tie them, because you don't know when you need to retie. There's several situations where, you know, you just need to retie. It needs to be fast. When the bite is on, you don't want to be that guy who doesn't fish or who couldn't fish because everybody else is fishing and you don't have a leader. Here's the worst thing there. If you actually ask a friend or ask someone else to do it for you, they have to stop their fishing. And that's not cool, man, you know? So, yeah, that's quite important. And I believe everyone that jigs or even casts or even just goes fishing should actually learn one of those knots that you can actually use. Now, as far as the end of the leader is concerned, learn how to tie a very strong knot. Now, a lot of people that go jigging use the chain knot. There's other knots and other variations out there, but learn how to tie those. This is essential, and they have their advantages, of course. Other people just tie the uni knot, and there's nothing wrong with that, just as long as you have a strong knot that connects your jig. Don't put a clinch knot there. It's you know, it's not gonna work. Well, it is gonna work up to a certain extent, but yeah, either a uni knot when you're in a pinch or a chain knot. Let's talk about standardizing your leader system here. A lot of people just say like, okay, this is the length of my leader and this and all that. We can say that there are long leaders and there are short leaders, and you need to know when you would actually be using one or the other. Now, for me, it's pretty straightforward. This is my system. There are times when I need a short leader. For a short leader, I make it the same length as my rod. For my long leader, double that or even triple that sometimes. It depends, okay? So my short leaders are usually my thickest. So if I'm using 40 for my double length, I would use 50. And for my triple length, I would use 30. There are certain situations where the bites are just so difficult to get. So I use thinner leaders. And for thinner leaders, I make them longer too, because I want as much distance from the lure to my braid. It aids in visibility, so kind of makes sense there. So remember, short leader would be the thickest. Double would be my, if my short leader is 50, my double would be 40, and then my triple length would be 30. The thing there also, you have to remember that when the jig is actually with a thick leader and you're, let's say, double the length of the rod, and you're using 50, it affects the jig. So the thinner my leader, the less it would affect the jig. And especially for slow jigging, what I want to do is actually get more strike. Always consider the maximum leader strength, length, and diameter for the jig you want to use for the fish you're targeting. And more importantly, for that awful time you snag. The stronger your leader, the harder it would be to pull off of a snag. I'm using PE2 for my slow jigging, and this is filled with PE4. Now, it's easier for me to pull snags with the PE4. Obviously, it's going to be a bit more tricky with PE2. Now, with PE2, I use an Oshia jigger and a Studio Ocean Mark. So I can lock the spool pretty much and just pull until something breaks. It could be that the hooks would straighten out. It could be the leader. It could be the knot. But most important thing there is that you make it easier. Okay, sometimes with the PE2, of course, the line is the one that busts, and it's even lucky if it's the connection to the PR or the FG that break. At least your line is intact, and you only lost your leader and your jig, which is the best case scenario. Well, the best case scenario is when your hooks actually open, and that's great. So you always have to think about these scenarios. It's the snags are horrible. Jigs aren't cheap, but it's part of it. So you also have to plan for that, not just the fish you catch. Fluorocarbon is great when you're fishing for fish that have great eyesight, a good eyesight, such as tunas and stuff. Mono will work just as well for most species, and since it's not as stiff, it'll actually give your jig a bit more movement. A good thing to remember when the bites are hard is either you use mono or you use fluorocarbon and you drop down a size. All right, so if you're using 40, try to use 30, longer length, or you could use mono to give your jig a bit more action. My experience with mono, they work just as well, and well, since they're cheaper, keeps the cost down. Some bonus tips: tie on a new leader for each trip, for each combo you're taking. This ensures you always have a new strong connection from your braid to leader. I think that's kind of self-explanatory here. It's a preventive measure, all right, and you always want to do this because you don't know what that knot or that leader has been through, and this is one of the most important things, and this is the whole reason why I also buy bulk, because I don't want those errors. I know some people are thinking that I want to save and all that. Yes, that's all in good, but if you want to catch that fish, you have to be ready. I'm gonna zoom in. All right, so that was cut with my teeth, and you could see there that it's jagged and everything. Now let's do this. And you can see right there that it's clean, okay? Now, when you're tying your knots, use a pair of scissors or the pliers that have the cutters. Now, the biggest pet peeve I have is when you have your connection to your jig, or worse, to your braid, and then you don't cut it with a pair of scissors or those cutters from your pliers. What happens is that this sticks out and it actually catches debris. And sometimes when there are some seasons in the water here that there are a lot of jellyfish. It's a type of jellyfish that kind of looks like string, and then when this is the part that snags it, the tag end. And when you have that, sometimes when you reel, the water splashes your face, and then boom, you just find this I don't know, it stings, and you don't want that. So tag end, always make sure that it's smooth. You cut it the way it's supposed to be cut with either a pair of scissors or cutters. All right, so there are pliers like this that have cutters here, and there are other fancy pliers out there that have cutters. Very, very important that you should do that, not with your teeth. Last and not the least, there are fishing lines such as this one, all right, that are labeled 100% fluorocarbon. And that's very important because this is a cheap source of leader material. Not necessarily saying that you should buy this particular one here, but there are others. Now, here's an example. I have one from Cabela's, and this thing has been with me for a really long time. And this is 8-pound test, and they're horrible things to use for fishing line. This particular one, but I found that they make really good leaders. So I've been using this for a really long time. As you can see there, tip number 15 is if you have spools like this, you could just get these Velcro straps for cheap. I got this in Daiso, and it's been like that for years. As you can see, even the color and all that. So you could just cover it like that, take a length, right? And that's the only thing that gets exposed with the sun. And this is one of those tricks that I use to make these things last. So you could just pull however long you want. Easy peasy, all right? I do that for my mono. This is an Andy. As you can see, these are leftovers from this particular one. This is a leftover from when I spooled a trolling reel, and I use them as leaders. So yeah, again, this is something that makes it just cheaper. Alrighty, so guys, I really hope you learned something here. Hope the tips are actually something that you could put to good use. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. Class dismissed.